All right. Something that came up with renegade history of the United States um, and the demonization of white Americans. Because really, now the more I really think about this, the memory, the living memory of a lot of kind of poor, the humble end of Scots-Irish people in the United States. A lot of these people don't really know how important they were to the United States. They just sort of know they were here. They don't really understand, like, no, you guys were the key to fighting for independence. You're actually one of the only groups that the idea of freedom was still an idea that absolutely lived in your society and your society alone until your people were conquered by the British and then forced to move to the colonies. So when I actually, so there's times where I could kind of understand some of these people of the Anglosphere colonies getting like mad about, maybe some kind of central governance or something like that. But this idea that what the working class whites are fighting is the rise of the white supremacists and the Nazis, and that a lot of there's a lot of Scots-Irish liberals, descendants of Scots-Irish liberals who are liberals, that they look back and they're like, oh, well, you see, we've always been kind of this underdog group that actually has been working to maintain freedom. So a lot of these people are a little too mesmerized by the union thing. This is an important part. People will confuse Scots-Irish with then a later era of Irish immigration that heavily um, organized around unions. And so this would be like where the era of like the Molly Malones and the Hibernians and such like, where it was that especially this is Ireland. This is a much more, is a little later. I think it's by the time you get to the latest 1700s and earliest 1800s of the Irish that you get these people who come over, and they are where a lot of the Irish mob starts. So there's a lot of people who are Scots-Irish that they are in no way, shape, or form, say, really related to the Boston Irish. So the people in Appalachia are a totally different group than, say, Boston lace curtain Irish. These good, very sober Catholics. The Irish were notorious, were absolutely notorious for breaking every social mores that the British felt was important. They would intermarry with Native Americans and blacks. They would carouse with Native Americans and blacks. They would sing and they would dance. All of these things were seen as a threat to Protestant society from the Irish Catholics. Now, as with the Scots-Irish, many of that group, what we call Scots-Irish, so Northern Ireland, and then Scotland, a lot of, when people were taken from there, put into the Anglosphere, a lot of those people ended up becoming the most strict Protestant groups. Some of the most strict. So, like Presbyterians, I believe, was one of the key ones. To the point where, when they had a Presbyterian minister somewhere in the Appalachians, that the claim was like that like it was actually a there it was something like, now they have a presbyter, or it's a Presbyterian republic in Appalachia, and that this was a bad thing, that because they now were dedicated to this, to Presbyterian Christian denomination, that this would unite them in a way. So the constant disunity of the Scots-Irish was also an important thing for a lot of Americans who wanted to keep Appalachia, the people of Appalachia, contained, and their way of life very much contained. We get folk music, we get most of our bluegrass, a huge portion of our country and country rock, a lot of it really is something that comes out of those people in Appalachia. There's actually very specific sounds that, like sort of cowboy music. While cowboy music compared to, say, bluegrass are two different things. And that's like one of these things that people like, only once you hear old enough songs does it make sense that cowboy music, the caballero music, is actually something far more related to something that's West Coast guitar, whistle based, and Latin, and actually a type of Spanish, Mexican, and European Creole that comes together to form this kind of music that has a very like, and you could even think of it with a lot of the twang of certain things, but then you can also think of the almost yodel that a lot of these people do. Now, there's yodelers who come from Europe, but from what I've gathered, that's actually not where we get the idea of yodeling originally. In that this is something that people who knew how to yodel knew that in the West there were people who did something similar. That apparently this is something that's related actually more to caballero, the cowboy culture, that was left when New Spain filled in a lot of the United States with very, very few people, and then those people were just sort of left there as Mexico and New Spain, as it was working out what it was. And then once the states and the territory started to take up more and more of old New Spain territory, that these people just were naturally pulling. These settlers, all this culture all became one thing for these, and these settlers started soaking in all these influences. A lot of country, like say Patsy Cline, if you actually listen to it, it's swing music. Like Patsy Cline is not traditional country in any way. It wouldn't even be almost old country. She's technically Texas swing. So it was swing music of New York brought back to Texas and included into the music. These white renegades, and especially the Scots-Irish, are incredibly important for our history. They're a big part of how the Grange movement even happened and was organized. They're also kind of the most distinctly lagging group of white Americans. The Irish, but then also this group called the Scots-Irish. They're the people who, for to this day, are still lagging. You know, that when you find, like clusters of drug abuse in rural America and alcoholism and stuff like that, the likelihood you're going to find people of Scots-Irish descent in large clusters is higher. Like, you're not going to find basically rural towns full of Germans where you have the same clusters of troubles, of social problems. At least so far as I've seen. This, it could be that this has changed within even my lifetime. But this is a group that also has been forgotten. The Scots-Irish and what they've done for America has been forgotten by the left. The left used to love them. The left used to esteem these people. They used to take their music and play it, but now if you listen to like what's supposed to be bluegrass, it has nothing to do with like the phrases of Scots-Irish people. Almost all slang we use to this day was Irish in origin, not Black American, not Black Southern stuff. They have their own slang. The Irish are where we get most urban East Coast slang from that traveled across the country. Why does the left need Nazis? The left needs Nazis because then it could say to these people who fought them, look, they're back. Like the British. They could say, look, the British are back. And the Scots-Irish fought the British. And then everybody forced these people, remember, no Okies? They forced these people into very specific parts of the society. Like one, Pennsylvania, Pennsyltucky. as I've heard it called. Who calls it this? A friend of mine who is not Scots-Irish descent. What does this friend like a lot? Scots-Irish, like renegade culture, as it was presented after the 60s by hippies. Most of the hippie culture is based on Scots-Irish renegade culture. You know, this thing of, don't tell me I can't drink. Don't tell me I can't smoke. Why do you drink? Why do you smoke? That was it. The family. It's a family decision. Yeah, you see, I love country music because there's these turns of phrases that are that, and I remember growing up around the Irishmen, and that they had a certain kind of cool to them, like it was this weird tough cool. And a big part of it was because, like, say, that generation in San Francisco, they remembered who they were. They remembered the role they played. A lot of people have forgotten this role they played, so they need a heroic role. They really, in some way, they want to be a part of something heroic. And they don't know, it's like, dude, you already were. Your ancestors were a part of something heroic. You're not getting that. The way the Republic works, your ancestors made it like this. The Constitution exists because Scots-Irish people were a group that everyone feared. So they're like, no, you can't take freedom away from people, because these Scots-Irish people will fight you until they're all dead for it. They will fight till they are all dead for their freedom. And I mean that's really how they really were, and how it really was. So a lot of times it's actually a bit disappointing to see so many people who are kind of on the left, these people of Scots-Irish descent. You see this a lot in the Northwest. There's a huge contingent of these people in the Northwest, and that's a lot of these people in Portland. A lot of these people in Portland, a lot of these people in NorCal, a lot of these people in rural Oregon, that they came out here because of troubles where they were from and opportunities, but also they didn't want to be fucking bothered. So they live in kind of they're very comfortable in the hinterland. That's where their people were originally from, the wet, cold hinterland. And so one of the things I like to make sure people understand is the villains you're looking for is central planning. It's people who want to organize you. So a lot of this, like, people have this sort of fascination with the Union era, with the past, with images from TV shows, images from songs, images from movies. No, you had a real past. And a real past that was really heroic. And, really, the Scots-Irish of Appalachia, they didn't have slaves. They didn't believe in slavery. And they didn't like the Southern planters who were slavers. And so they were also a big part of fighting it, because they were a big reason why you just couldn't, there was stuff you couldn't do in their territory. You had to watch out for them. And so people minded their P's and Q's. It kept all these other groups that were way more powerful, way more functional, had greater numbers. It kept them all at bay. Until there were so many different types of settlers that now the interests of, say, the Virginian Chevaliers, the Puritans of the Northeast, these kinds of people, they no longer had the kind of power over everybody that they wanted. So here's an example. Appalachia didn't send but one, like, minor person, I think, to or like 3 delegates to the Continental Congress. I think to the first one. I think the Deep South sent like 1 person from, like, Charleston or something like that. Like, these were 2 groups, the Southern planters and the Scots-Irish of Appalachia, that to a great extent they weren't that interested. They were like, we're free. But once they realized, wait a second, the British, those fucking Britons, they're going to come and they're going to suppress us again, just like they did before. And so that's why they fought so hard. I don't really like anymore that there's this bizarre like allegiance between the forces of anti-Trump, thinking, oh, white guilt, we have to make up for our ancestors' mistakes. No, 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 no. Poor Scots-Irish Americans, you don't have shit to apologize for. You don't have a fucking thing to apologize for. In fact, the United States government has a lot of questions to answer about how it is that all of these drugs keep getting into America and especially affecting your community. When they know this, when all kinds of experts know your descendants are the people this is most likely to affect negatively. Why do we keep allowing for this all to be forgotten? Why do we not praise these people anymore? Why do we not talk about how Germans rarely organized in a political fashion as Germans in America? Like nobody thinks of Eisenhower as our first German American president. Note though, Kennedy, Irish, Catholic. Oh my gosh, an Irish Catholic president. You know, that was a big deal then. That was a big fucking deal. So I just wanted to put that out there, that a lot of white Americans with this white guilt stuff, you are thinking of your history in terms that only come from mass media, that don't come from real research on your history, on who you people were, on where your roots came from and what those people did. You know, that it's very unlikely, if you are a white American whose people came here in the 1800s, it's almost impossible that you own slaves. They're usually inherited. So it's more likely like you have to go back to almost the 1600s to be a white person who comes from a lineage of slave owners. It's actually even a little more likely for right now that you are a black American who actually comes from a lineage of slave owners. At this point, with the white people who are here, so many of them came after the slavery era, or entered states where there was no slavery, or came after the Civil War, that the vast majority of Americans who are here, their ancestors like have no memory of the Civil War, have no memory of the War of 1812. They came here after all that shit. They came here way after all that shit. And so they have nothing to apologize for. Without them building, the Scots-Irish and them building things, we wouldn't have, like, the West Coast would not exist without a lot of the Scots-Irish helping do that. Yeah, it's just, when I think about this every so often, and it's because I have a personal, because coming out of Catholic school, out of San Francisco, where there was this huge Irish community, and they really saw themselves as, you know, the Irish Catholic community, that I have a lot of respect for them. And really was like, no, what happened was a lot of Scots-Irish people were considered sort of these loud-mouthed, wild-eyed Scots. So they were pushed into into areas so that they would be there. And all these British people or Dutch people or they would be over here. You know, like the Quakers were deathly afraid of Scots-Irish Appalachian, deathly afraid of them. And so that's why it's like I just wanted to put that out there, because there's just too many people that they do have a bit of like sort of this misunderstood, like, why would you be ashamed? You're free, and your ancestors are why there's even a concept of freedom. You know, like the Anglosphere almost wouldn't even exist if it wasn't for the grueling labors of the Scots-Irish. They're the ones who established all those cotton fields that later black slaves were picking. They were the ones who drained a lot of these swamps that later became sugar plantations that then black slaves were working on fully developed sugar plantations. That's why it's like a lot of this. I'm like, and then when it comes to intermarriage with Native Americans, Scots-Irish are far more likely. It's very likely that if you are a white American with Native American blood, that the white side of your family is Scots-Irish. You could be part French or Cajun, but the likelihood that you're Scots-Irish and that's why they intermarried, far more likely. And I just wanted to put that out there because Scots-Irish people have nothing to apologize for, and giving up your rights to the EU, giving your rights up to some kind of central planning of the federal government, thinking that you have these allies on the left who are fighting for your history. Did you know your history? Because your allies don't. None of your allies care, and you have to understand that your allies think that you're just sort of they associate you only with drinking, with dancing, with reels, maybe with yeehaw, but I mean, their thing is, oh, these are reformed rednecks. These are rednecks who've learned a better way because we, the allies, have taught them that they must oppose the other whites because of white shame and white guilt. And that's bullshit. That's a bunch of fucking bullshit. And I just want to make sure I put that out there because this is something I really do think that there are a lot of people of this descent that don't really know, like, no, none of these communists are ever really on your side. You all have no idea, like, the way socialism has been very socialism, proxy war, proxy violence, stuff like that. The central command making your life hard. The British, like one of the things that most importantly, the EU thing. Brexit's one of the best possible things that can happen. And Scotland being like, no, we're European, we want to stay a part of the EU. We want to be socialist. The Irish, we want to stay a part of the EU. And it's like, so at this stage, when will you actually finally have power over the British? Do you think the EU will give you power? Scots people, Ireland, do you think the EU will give you power? Because that's what's going on. You want them to give you some power. But the United Kingdom, if they're all on their lonesome, well, there's only so much England makes. They need you. They need you, Ireland. They need you, Scotland. And they need you. You're obviously telling them, well, we don't need you, Britain, but, well, think about it. Britain needs you. The EU, do they need you, Scotland? Do they need you, Ireland? Or are you just a place where they like to launder money? Because that's what I've gotten the idea of. Don't give in. This is still a fight against central planning out of Germany and central planning out of places like Belgium. This is still a fight. This is still a fight against the crown itself. The crown still... Look, everybody else, there's no more kings and queens. And the only ones that are around are shockingly uncool, like the King of Spain, and how he sicked his own police forces on people who wanted to leave the EU. The Queen of England, will do anything to make her own British, Scots, Welsh, Manx, all her subjects. Her subjects are second tier to all these people who are being imported, and it doesn't look like for any really good reason, being that Britain has to spend this tremendous amount of money on all these people who are coming to Britain who just go on the dole for their whole lives or for generations. The Scots-Irish are paying for that. You're all paying for all this welfare, for all these people who really know nothing about you. They don't respect you. They don't play your music. They don't know your songs. And in fact, will they remember them? Really? Will they remember Staggerly? Staggerly wasn't a black song. Yeah. Scots-Irish people, don't give up. Don't give in. Don't be fooled. You fought, and this republic owes you. This republic owes your descendants freedom. Don't give your freedom up. Build the wall, lower taxes, and teach your own children. Teach your children your ways, your past. Because everybody else is doing that. And who knows what they're saying about you over their dinner tables. Do you really think about all those people who they're not Scots-Irish? They're the people who pushed your people into the hinterlands. What are they actually saying about people like you from the past? What are they saying you're like now? Rednecks on meth, rednecks on oxy. Pennsyltuckians. It's not right. Like that, I've always been very offended by such speech, and I was like, why do white people talk about each other like this? Like, what do they think they're getting out of it? Like, do they think that's impressive to non-white people or to partially white people? Like, why would that be impressive to me? I grew up around Irish people. My godmother for First Communion and baptism, Miss Fitzpatrick. It's like, well, what the hell? What, but yeah. So I just want to put that out there in praise of the Scots-Irish and their wild ways. And I want to thank you for the freedom that you ensured our republic.